Hi, I'm Ken Pfalzgraf. I'm a candidate for the Acton Agua Dulce Unified School District Board of Trustees, and I'm making these videos so you, the voter, can have an idea about where I stand on the issues, and hopefully you'll be prompted to vote for me on November 8th. Remember, I'm doing this at home, so there's no support team. The makeup's done. I got 2 cans of Aquanet and the Elvis flip, so let's rock and roll. Today's subject is transparency. Now, lately, I've seen government, when you hear bureaucrats and politicians speak, it's paradigm shift or fostering a collaborative environment, or I'm leveraging federal something or other. What is all that? What does it mean? Can you put your finger on anything? But it's just this round and round donut rhetoric with nothing in the middle. And lately I'm seeing transparency show up on that list too. I want to share something with you that Ayn Rand, who wrote Atlas Shrugged, said in one of her letters. If clear-cut principles, unequivocal definitions, and inflexible goals are barred from public discussion, then a speaker or writer has to struggle to hide his meaning, if there is one, under coils of meaningless generalities and safely popular bromides. Regardless of whether his message is good or bad, true or false, he cannot state it openly, but must smuggle it into his audience's subconscious by means of the same unfocused, deceptive, and evasive verbiage. He must strive to be misunderstood in the greatest number of ways by the greatest number of people. This is the only way to keep up the pretense of unity. And it's becoming more and more about that. And I've noticed that if you question something in process, suddenly you become an enemy of the process or the community or something like that. So I'm outspoken, I say what I think, and I'm not always right, but I think people appreciate knowing where I come from, so we have a point of discussion to start with. Again, let's talk about transparency. What is transparency? Well, in my world, it separates the private sector from the public sector. And in this context, we're going to mean the public sector is schools, okay, or public education. First, in terms of money, the private sector is self-funded. Either you're putting your own money on the table at risk, or you're getting some investors to put their money up. Where in public education, you're being funded by the taxpayer. So there's some differences there, and it's transparency is the big one. In the private sector, I got a secret or priority product or something. So that dog on the baked bean commercial, you know, you got to keep the recipe secret, Colonel. We don't want everybody making the same kind of chicken because then our profits will go down. Well, there's no secret or priority thing going on in the public sector, because it's all supposed to be open and public, and the public, in fact, is supposed to participate because they have the ability to see where their tax dollars are going and if there's measurables and if things are being effective. In the end, in the private sector, you got people selling products or services. We're not selling a product or service in education, we're educating students. So the end result of all this in the private sector is personal wealth building. That's what it is. You're there to make money and make as much as you can by getting as many clients as you can or customers to buy your product and keeping everybody happy and keeping that growing and building, and then you end up with more and more money. Sometimes people lose sight of what the goal is in public education. It's to further educate students. So if I'm in 2nd grade, I need to be able to be educated enough to go through all the grades and then go to college and do what I do. So ultimately, the goal of education is to produce independent and successful adults who function normally and do well and are successful in our world. Now, my experience here in this district in the 5 years that I've been attending the board meetings is I've had a couple of glitches. So the 5-year plan that we're talking about now wasn't always in place. And that 5-year plan tells us what's happening for 5 years. And I don't think that's anything new. I think they ask you that in most job interviews. I think most successful companies and most successful individuals, they have a plan as to what's going to happen over the next 5 years. So, But when I didn't know what the 5-year plan was, and when I started asking about, you know, what is the head executive's goals given by the governing body, I ended up, it took me a year to get them, and I was getting letters back from attorneys, and I ultimately had to go to the regulatory agency to get the information. They gave it to me freely once they got it, but in that process, you want to remember, this is public education. The taxpayers are paying for everything, and the process was supposed to be open and public. And so that kind of frustrated me. The next thing is, this district is highly dependent on charter schools, and I'm going to do a couple of videos about that to break that down, because charter schools are great, but public education is being privatized, and one methodology of doing that is through corporate charter school building. We'll talk about that later. But when I wanted to know what exactly is being changed in this one agreement we have with the charter school, it wasn't made available to me in the meeting. It was made available on the website, and then there was no charter school name on it. It was just a lot of crossed out stuff. There's a story about a drug addict who stabbed another student, and then grandmother joined the PTA. That's all great information, but I should have been given this information before the meeting, and I wasn't, and the decision was made without the public being able to see this. That frustrates me. And we know the district is highly dependent on charter school funds, and they issued a nice charter school report, but as you go through it, when it gets down to this level of stuff, where's the money? How much is being made? It's not here. So you have no idea where the money is or how the money is, and I think that we need to improve there. So what can I do? What can I do? I'm just not about up here talking to you about what's wrong. Remember, I'm a 15-year public servant. I work for a public sector agency. There's transparency there, and I talked about that a little bit in my last video about Meet Ken Pfalzgraf, so catch that there. So I'm not going to go over that again and again, but here's the bottom line. 72 hours before the public meeting, we're supposed to, as taxpayers, have the reports outside of closed session items, and again, I won't introduce that here, but the things that are on the agenda, we should know what the board, the governing body knows. So if I'm on the board, I'm going to want you to have access to the same materials that I have 72 hours before the meeting. I'm going to have access 72 hours before the meeting. Why shouldn't you? And if I don't get that, there is a problem, and I will be vocal about that. So what do we mean about what should be available to you? Well, when it comes to something we're doing or a policy to be set, there needs to be a staff report. And what does that staff report say? Well, it introduces the subject. It tells you what you need to know to come up to speed. It tells you about the challenges. It tells you about the success or whatever. And it tells you what needs to be done and what basis that decision was formed upon by the staff member who's suggesting it. You need to know, where's the money coming from, where's it coming from now, and where's it coming from in the future, and is the funding sustainable to make this program good for the long term. And finally, there's a staff recommendation. The person who's in charge of whatever the report's about has to say to the board, here's my recommendation, here's why. Now, you may never, I've spent a lot of time alone in the school board meeting, so not everybody is up on reading all this, and it doesn't matter whether you're up on it or not. But if you do want to participate, you got 72 hours ahead to look at this stuff and educate yourself, and you might stop in and say, this affects me in a bad way, or I love this, I'm glad you guys are doing this, I think you should do more of this. Or possibly, you know, the public can think, and sometimes they come forward with an idea that nobody thought of, and it could actually be a plus to this, whatever this project is. Finally, the last thing I want to talk about is, when it comes to spending money and contracts, here's what needs to be in a staff report. First off, what was done? Next, why was it done? Third, what was the bid process? Who was awarded the bid? And how much is going to be spent? And that all is say for example, a contract, an agreement with XYZ Corporation to demolish X school in the amount of X. And it says that very clearly on the agenda subject line, and then there's a staff report that goes with it. So, I believe that I can dramatically improve the transparency in the function of the school board just by being there and being a part of it and being noisy when I have to and prodding this along, because in the end I think a lot of the unknowns about funding, about where we're going, can be easily dismissed if the public is granted the opportunity for this. So thanks for watching my video. Remember to subscribe, make your comment, like my video, and spread it around to your friends. And if you got a comment for me, I'd appreciate hearing that too. So once again, Ken Pfalzgraf for AADUSD Board of Trustees. Thanks.